Do you think it's strange to say that when farmland has been tended and cherished for generations, it may come to cherish the people who live on and by it? Or that the land, loving its people, keeps watch over them to guard them from harm? For more years than most of us can remember, our township had been the safest place anywhere. In our township, something seemed to be dead set against our having accidents. Something seemed to keep us from having to pay the consequences of our own or someone else's carelessness. Most of us were too accustomed to the way we lived to notice that things were different in our township from the way they were anywhere else. Martha Stevens, who has a special love and understanding of all the world about her, knew all along why our township was different. A lot of us have tried to explain the strange thing that changed our way of living. If you believe Jim Stevens, it all had something to do with the law of averages. Pete Andrews, like a lot of other people in our community, really led a charmed life, and he'd grown used to it. Pete would tell you that it's all a matter of luck, or having a guardian angel. Clint Snowden, who ought to know, says that we were living in a fool's paradise. Little Carol Snowden, the one we call Taffy because of her hair, had no opinions at all on the subject. To understand why our township was truly the safest place to live, you should have been at Jim Stevens' house soon after his daughter Peggy talked Jim into trading in the old piano for a new electric organ. Saturday night at Jim's house, friends usually drop in for dessert, coffee, and good conversation, with Peggy's music for added attraction.
Peggy, that was wonderful.
Jim, where does your family get all its talent?
Not from me. The only thing I know about music is that I like to listen to it.
Oh, Peggy, play that piece you were practicing this morning. You know, the one that goes da 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 da.
Oh, Mother, you know I just barely learned it. But I'll try it anyway. Hold your ears, everyone. Was I that bad?
Oh, no, it's just a fuse that blew out. Don't worry, I'll have it fixed in a minute.
Can I help you?
No, thanks, Clint. I'll take care of it.
Clint, we'll just use these candles. Luckily, I always keep some handy.
Well, I'll bet this isn't the first time around this house that a fuse is blowing out.
Jim tried several different size fuses in the panel box. The first 2 or 3 burned out. Jim didn't know it at the time, but the trouble was out at the barn. Some temporary wiring he'd rigged up under the eaves short-circuited and set the barn roof on fire. However, the faulty wiring soon burned away. So it wasn't long before Jim was able to get the lights going again. Meanwhile, the fire got a good start. Jim rejoined the party in time to hear what almost happened to Pete Andrews early that afternoon.
There I was, halfway up the hill, tractor engine wide open, and then the stone boat snagged up on a roof. Well, before I could do anything about it, the front end of that machine reared up like a wild horse. And that's when the drag chain broke, just in time so the tractor didn't topple back on me.
Oh.
It was a close one.
I guess the next time you haul stones up an embankment, you'll be sure to use a weak chain, huh?
Funny thing about that chain, I've seen it stand up under much heavier loads. Yet this is the one time it chose to break.
Oh, you're lucky. Hey, look, everybody. It's raining.
Oh. That's strange. It was clear when we arrived. You could see all the stars.
According to the radio, it was supposed to be dry and clear all weekend.
That's what the TV said, too.
Well, it just goes to show that they can't predict weather any better now than they could in my great-grandfather's time. Come on, Peggy, come on. Let's have some more music, huh?
The weather forecasts were right, except in our township, where it rained just enough to put out the fire on Jim's barn roof. You see, something always happened to save us the consequences of an accident. Take Elmer DeGroat. Elmer thought he could get a clogged machine started again faster than anyone you ever saw, mainly because he didn't waste time shutting down the power. Once Elmer slipped, and just then the tractor engine stopped. Elmer found out later that some dirt had gotten in the carburetor and plugged it up. Quite a coincidence, wasn't it? You could depend on it. In our township, if a ladder rung was going to break or fall out, it wouldn't be when a man had his weight on it. We never worried about danger of any kind, because nothing bad had ever happened to us. No matter what foolish chances we took, we just knew we wouldn't be hurt. We left ponds and ditches unfenced, because we knew from experience that small children simply didn't fall into them. We let our children go swimming and fishing and even hunting without supervision, because we were certain they would be safe. Considering everything, it's possible to understand why Clint, Taffy Snowden's father, never got around to filling in that old, unused spring-fed well behind his dairy barn. After Clint quit using the spring to water his stock, he put boards across the top and forgot about it. To Taffy Snowden, the old well was an enchanted cave where falling pebbles made the loveliest splashing sound. It was all the more fascinating because it was a secret place to play without being bothered by grown-ups. Then, one afternoon, Taffy's favorite doll forgot to be careful. Taffy tried to save her. When Clint Snowden came in from the fields, Taffy wasn't out by the barn gate as usual to greet him. The Snowdens don't have a big place, and it didn't take the two of them long to be certain that Taffy wasn't anywhere to be found.
Taffy!
We must have looked like an army of fireflies, all the neighbors with flashlights and lanterns, swarming through the fields and woods all around the Snowden place, looking for Taffy.
Hi, Doc.
Hi, here.
Oh.
Well, no trace of her yet.
Let me take care of that, Pete, while you have some coffee.
Thanks, I can use it.
Now look, Ori, will you and Dolph make another check of the orchard? I'm going to set some crews to work dragging the ponds.
All right, Chief. But about the ponds. Don't let Clinton know that you think it's that hopeless. He's like a crazy man now.
Yeah, I know, but we've got to try everything. We're going to find that baby if it means putting this township through a sieve.
Peggy, you look a mess. Are you all right?
Sure, Mom.
Jim Stevens found her at the bottom of her enchanted cave, and his heart was in his throat. She was so tiny and so still. Finding the baby was one thing. Getting her out was another. There wasn't room enough to lower anyone safely, so we had to dig down alongside the well, then break a hole in the crock to get to her. Men can do a lot of digging when there's a little girl at the bottom of a well. That's one time blisters on a man's hands don't seem to bother him.
She's okay!
Now that you understand about our famous luck, as we used to call it, you'll be happy and not too surprised to know that Taffy was mostly just tired, cold, and too frightened to cry. How lucky there wasn't enough water to drown her. Luck was all we could talk about. While we were all busy patting each other on the back over our good fortune in living in a community where a baby couldn't drown, where fires were rained out before they got a fair start, where tractors couldn't fall on people, where no matter how reckless and careless we were, and no matter how many chances we took, something or other always came along to keep us from real trouble. Well, it must have been about then that same something or other declared war on us.
Jim Stevens, look over there at your place. The barn. My barn's on fire. The Stevens barn's on fire!
Suddenly, our township was no longer the safest place to live. And because we had always been sheltered from danger, we had a hard time understanding that we were at war.
As soon as we got the animals out, the whole barn caved in. What puzzles me is the feeling I had that no matter what we did, we never could have saved that barn.
Sure, the ladder was a bit shaky, but it's held up all right for years.
For months, I've been after Jerry to fix that loose step on the cellar stairs.
I brought that bullet from a calf. He's never shown any mean streaks before.
You get the feeling that everything you own has turned mean. That shelf, for instance. It was a bit wobbly, but it held up all right for years. Years, mind you, until this morning. Then, without a soul being near it, down came the whole shebang. 30 bags of seed all mixed together. Mighty peculiar.
Most of us were puzzled, and many of us were frightened.
In the past day, we have answered 4 alarms. Stevens' barn and Corrigan's tool shed were totally destroyed by fire, and 2 homes were seriously damaged.
Once the trouble started, it was something new every day.
All right, Bert. What's your version of the accident?
Well, the lights on my tractor weren't working. So I took a shortcut along the highway to get home while it was daylight left. Then this tourist fella comes along, smacks into me, and wrecks my machine.
Well, you can be glad I wasn't driving faster. Things would have been a lot worse.
All right, young fella, just relax until I get you patched up.
Frankly, Doc, I'm scared. So far in all this trouble, there haven't been any deaths or any very serious injuries, but if things go on like this, somebody's bound to pay the full price. That's what scares me.
After years of peace in our community, every farm family and the townspeople, too, began to believe that we were up against an invisible enemy, waging a war we didn't understand. Then, at a blind intersection on the highway, Sam Dotson just drove his truck out in front of a school bus full of kids. No one was hurt. The bus driver used his head and drove off the road. But we couldn't get out of our minds what might have happened to our children. The accident to the school bus was a final warning to us. From that point on, we were afraid we'd be playing for keeps. That's why we met at the firehouse, a crowd of worried people trying to find an answer.
But whatever it is that's causing this epidemic of accidents, I don't understand it, and I don't like it.
This town is jinxed. That's what it is. Permanently jinxed.
Now, let me tell you something. Every darn crazy, impossible thing that's been happening in this town can be blamed on the law of averages. Why, we've had everything too good for a long time. And now nature has to balance her books. That's what's going on.
Well, I say our luck has turned. There's no rhyme or reason to luck. Everybody knows that. All we can do is just, well, wait till it changes back again.
Pete Andrews, don't you stand there complaining about our luck turning bad and how we'll have to wait until it turns good again. And I think even less, Jim Stevens, of your idea about nature balancing her books. Are we going to study nature's bookkeeping while our houses and our barns burn down and our men are hurt, are killed? Do we have to let our children become part of your law of averages? I don't want to spend the rest of my life looking at an empty chair in my home. A chair where someone in my family used to sit.
Please, may I say something?
Yeah, of course, Peggy. Go ahead.
Well, at school and in our club safety programs, we learned that to be really safe, you have to know all the things that could possibly make you unsafe. Then you have to have a plan to get rid of them before they can make trouble. And one more thing they've tried to teach us. Safety is a full-time job. And if we keep safety in mind, not part of the time, but all of the time, danger will stay away.
Now, that's really the first real suggestion we've had. Crack down on every possible danger spot, and maybe this thing that's been hitting us will run out of ammunition.
Well, come on, let's get organized. This thing is like a war, and we can't win it unless we're all in it together.
But by all means, the sooner we go to war, the sooner we'll find out who the enemy is. I think we'll all be surprised.
All along, Martha had her own idea as to what was going on. After the meeting, some of us stood outside just looking around and breathing deep. It was Jim Stevens who put words to what was in our minds.
Funny thing, you know, I have the feeling that some sort of truce has just been declared.
As usual, our women were the first to go into action. And because of the different clubs they belonged to, they were already well organized. They declared war against inflammable trash and started a cleanup campaign for all kinds of dangerous clutter around house and barn. They prodded their men into getting rid of all the makeshift wiring and overloaded electrical circuits that our do-it-yourself electricians were so proud of. And like avenging angels, they stood over us while we put the safety guards back on the machines where they belonged. Our women knew that men work more safely when they have an occasional spot of relaxation. So we started taking a little breathing spell, mornings and afternoons. The idea of being at war with an unseen enemy appealed to the imaginations of all the children in the neighborhood. So they naturally joined up in earnest. Singly and in packs, they scoured the countryside, snooping, peering, prying, clearing up the blind intersections, ferreting out all sorts of hazards we'd always ignored. They tackled a lot of jobs themselves, and what they couldn't handle landed on a list of things for Dad to do. It was the young people who talked us into numbering all our farms, so they'd be easier to find in case of emergency. They bought first aid kits and made us put them up where they'd come in handiest. Then they saw to it we knew how to make use of them. And it was the young people who, through their safety organizations and group activities, kept us on the track of pinpointing our safety problem, checking off one by one all the things that could possibly keep us from being safe. But the biggest change of all, of course, was in people's attitude toward safety. Once we realized that being safe is mostly a matter of attitude, we stopped doing a lot of unsafe things and started doing things the way we'd known all along was right. These days, when a machine clogs up or jams, we shut off the power before we try to fix the trouble. We don't use ladders that are too short for the job. We don't climb up on anything until we've checked to make sure the footing is solid and the angle is right. Our people love their animals, but they respect them too, especially when they're in any kind of enclosure with a large animal. As they say, no one has ever been hurt by a bad bull. It's the good ones that surprise you. There isn't a man among us now who doesn't keep an eye on his young people to see that they have a chance to learn the safe way of doing things. The truce is still on. We know that it will last only as long as we ourselves keep the peace. Certainly in our township, things aren't as they were before the change we were talking about. But in a way, we're a lot safer now than we ever were before, because we no longer depend on lucky breaks and near miracles to keep us out of trouble. We depend on ourselves, the only sure way to safety. And just as Martha Stevens predicted, we were all somewhat surprised to find out that the only real enemy we'd ever had to fight had been our own unsafe ways of doing things.
Oh, yeah? The new barn's coming on. They all got out. You know, I think something good is coming out of all this.
I like to think it all happened because our land loves us. I've often thought that on our farm I could feel the love flowing out from the land. To Jim and me and to our children. I think it's the same on all the farms around us. Makes us feel warm and safe and protected. Just like when we were children and knew our parents loved us. Sometimes when a child has been protected too long, it may have to be hurt a little before it can learn to stop doing the things it knows are wrong and dangerous. That's part of growing up. our community, too, needed to grow up. Perhaps we had to be hurt a little before we could learn to stop doing the things we knew were wrong and dangerous. Our land is very old, so it must be very wise. It knew we had to stand on our own feet, so it helped us, because it loves us. That's the way I like to think it is.
Peggy.
You, of course, will have your own opinion about Martha Stevens' idea, that our land loved and protected us, and that it seemed to turn against us only so that we might learn a sadly needed lesson. But looking back, quite a few of us believe it happened that way, to make our township really the safest township anywhere.